Hi, everyone. I am so excited to welcome today Lisa Smith, who is joining us for Discover Your Purpose. And thank you so much, Lisa, for being here. I'm just really grateful and honored that you are here to share your wisdom with us for this series.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Nicole.
Awesome. So I'm going to tell you all a little bit about Lisa, and then we're going to jump into this conversation. So Lisa A. Smith is a serial entrepreneur, health and wellness subject matter expert, nutritionist, and professional speaker. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in business administration. And she's certified in plant-based nutrition, the executive director of the Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group, and the author of the Plant-Based Foodie and creator of the signature Farm to Table Plant-Based course. Lisa is a highly sought after speaker and presenter on plant-based nutrition, holistic health, and entrepreneurship, who epitomizes what it means to be a passionate community leader. Lisa, really is such an honor to have you here. And I'm so excited about everything that you do and what you share. And really what I'm curious about, because so much of this series is really around how do people discover purpose for themselves. And what I really wanted to do is introduce powerful women who did that, made that journey for themselves, or are in that practice of it, and what their experience is like. And I love that you have this plant-based nutrition background as well. So really wherever it makes sense for you to start telling us about how that started, because usually, it can be a winding road a little bit to get to this place.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Nicole. So what's really interesting is when I was a young kid, like in elementary school, the only thing I ever really remember wanting to be for a brief period was a teacher. I used to line up my stuffed animals in my room and act like they were my students and that I was teaching them. And at that time, I can't even say I wanted to be a teacher. I would just model a teacher's behavior. And the reason I reframed it is because as I ascended to middle school and high school and on to university, I never even thought about being a teacher. It wasn't something I pursued. So that's the only kind of career-like thing I remember modeling was a teacher, right? And so as I began to ascend through my education journey, and then, the structure we have in America forces you to choose what you want to be for the rest of your life in your early 20s, right? So I had no idea at that time. And so I decided to follow in the footsteps of my best friend at that time. And I went on to study psychology because that's what she was studying in university. And when she graduated and was trying to find a job that would accept her social science degree, she found social work. And so I followed in her footsteps and went into social work. But essentially what began to happen, of course, because I wasn't aligned with that work, what I knew is that I wanted to see the world. And so I began to search for careers that would allow me to see the world. So it wasn't about what I would be doing in the role. It was about where I would be that mattered the most. And so I decided to pursue a career with the federal government, with the State Department. And I wanted to kind of be a diplomat only because I could get stationed in different places, right? So I ended up actually quitting my job as a social worker, and because I got exactly what I wanted, which was a job at the United States Embassy in Rome. And so I quit my job as a social worker, and uprooted, cashed in my 401k, and moved to Italy. And I'm working at the US Embassy. And of course, the thing here again was just where I was. So I'm loving, checking out the city, loving the country, flying to other countries on the weekend. And when my gig was up with the US Embassy, I said, okay, I got back to the US and I'm like, how can I get back out of here? And so less than a year later, I uprooted and moved to Foshan, China. And then there I began teaching English as a second language. So for me, it was just, I love exploration, right? But when I began teaching English as a second language, and that was kind of the start unintentionally of a teaching career. So I got certified to teach English as a second language, did it in Foshan, China, got back to the US, continued to teach Chinese girls here in the US, English. And then I went on to become a personal trainer because by this time I had started on my own personal health journey and started losing weight and really enjoyed it. And so then I decided, after teaching English as a second language, I wanted to become a personal trainer. Here I am with 2 degrees, social work, MBA, doing nothing related to any of them. And I'm now a personal trainer, right? So I'm doing personal training. And again, then I started noticing from a professional standpoint, that my clients weren't quite getting high level results the way I wanted them to. And the missing piece was nutrition. So I started kind of studying nutrition to see how I could teach it better to my clients, and be a better personal trainer. Discovered whole food, plant-based diet, realized it was the most optimal diet for longevity and optimal health. Adopted it myself to kind of test the waters, then begin to really study it, got certified in plant-based nutrition. And fell out of love with personal training, and then began to teach plant-based nutrition full time. Developed my first course about 4 years ago. And now I have, which was Farm to Table, which is really, really booming. We've had hundreds of people go through Farm to Table. And I, developed the entire curriculum. It's a 10-week program. And then, one good business, if you have a good product, if it solves one problem and creates another, right? And so what began to happen is, as my students began to graduate from Farm to Table, a lot of them caught the coaching bug and really wanted to explore teaching this content on their own. So now in just a few months here, I'm releasing my very own plant-based certification program. And so essentially what happened, Nicole, is that I inevitably became a teacher, but not in the, sense that most will follow, right? I never have gotten certified as a teacher. I've never went to school for education, but I definitely eventually made that daydream and that little playtime as an elementary school student with my stuffed animals come to real life, and developed basically my own academy. My company is called the Black Health Academy, and then created my own courses. And now I'm a full-time teacher.
I have so many things to say and try to track with that story, because that was so incredible. So awesome. By the way, I also taught English in China. And so I was just laughing because that's when I decided I would not be a teacher. And here I am, totally a teacher. So anyways, that just made me laugh, because I was like, I'm not cut out for this. This is hard. I'm not going to teach.
Not the classroom, not the formal classroom. Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
Anyway, that was just so funny. I was like, oh my gosh, I love that kind of connection and intersection. Anyway, so cool. Well, I want to track back to even what you were talking about, the structure in our country that tells you that you should have these degrees, and then that's going to determine your career. I just wanted to point that out again, because I think it's such a thing that I see all the time with women, that like, oh, I have to follow this path where I have to know by 25 the rest of my life. And I'm like, well, let's just let go of that. Because I loved your career. And then you were like, and then I went to Italy, and I was like, oh my gosh, like you did all these cool things. And like just your going. I love it. No, I mean, like just your journey. I was like literally just riveted, Lisa. So it was amazing. One of the things I really want to understand and see how your journey on this is like, how did you sustain the confidence, that valuing yourself to keep pursuing things that were really outside the grain, like leaving social work, for example, which I'm sure people would be like, oh, that's such a cool career. You're really helping people. And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to go do this. And now I'm going to go do this. Like what for you, I don't know if it was internal, if you had lots of teachers yourself along the way that helped you really maintain being able to pivot that quickly. Because I would say for a lot of us, that's the challenge. It's like, how do you keep making that change and that shift when life is evolving? And it sounded like you did it really early, actually. And I'm curious what you went through to be able to do those things.
Yeah, really following what resonates in that season. And so it's my belief that you kind of land at the intersection of your gifts and talent and purpose, starting with a selfish reasoning, right? Which is, this work isn't resonating with me. It's not making me happy. It's a me and I inner dialogue, right? As it should be. And I believe that one of the ways that you know whether or not you're even on purpose in your life, I actually have a podcast called Obedience, Life Lessons of Professional Life Lessons of a Life Lived on Purpose. So I talk about obedience and alignment literally all the time. And one of the things I say is that I believe you know whether or not you're on purpose if you're serving. Everyone's purpose is tied to service, right? And so what many people, when they tell their story, kind of like self-discovery and finding kind of where they fit in the world, you'll hear over and over again, like, I wasn't fulfilled and I didn't feel like I was making a difference. That making a difference piece is so huge, because you can be doing work that's technically designed to make a difference, like social work, right? But it's not aligned with who you are in that season of your life, right? And it could have been at one point, and then you outgrow it. That's kind of how personal training was for me, right? Giving people the confidence back in their body and making them feel good again. That's really purposeful work, but there became a point where it no longer served me, right? And so kind of being tuned into that is what helped me make those pivots quickly, Nicole, is that, okay, is this resonating with me? Am I solving a problem in the world? And is it aligned with my gifts and talents? And so those are kind of the boxes that I check. My gifts is speaking and communication. And I do very well at taking, maybe difficult to understand concepts and breaking them down and simplifying them so individuals can understand them better and apply them where needed. And so communication is really my gift, right? And so speaking, teaching, right, and coaching really aligns with that. Now, my gifts will never change, but the way in which I utilize them may, because the work may no longer resonate with what I'm doing. So teaching English as a second language, being a personal trainer, all of those, I was using my gifts of communication and teaching, right? But, I've had to pivot several times. And so now I'm at a place where, I teach plant-based nutrition full time. And I absolutely love it, right? But there may come a time where that no longer serves me. And so both ends, you and the people who are on the receiving ends of your gift, should be getting served. And so when that's not happening anymore, that's usually the first indicator that it's time to pivot.
Mm-hmm. And did you have, how did you learn that? I love what you say and how you say it, but how did you learn it? Even when you were younger?
No, it's not something I learned. This is all hindsight. So I've reverse engineered my journey a little bit, kind of thinking about, because I have this 5-day audio course that we give to our Farmers Table alumni, and it's called Sci-Fi Psychological Fitness. And in one of those audios, I talk about becoming a chronic a finisher. Many of us start things, but we don't finish, right? And so when I was recording this audio course a couple of years ago, I was kind of thinking back on my own career and how it looked like this hodgepodge of random crap that I was just trying out in my life. Nothing made sense, right? And but I remember hearing her name escapes my memory, but the author of Eat, Pray, Love one time, she was talking about how she would be doing these huge talks and talking about purpose and do what you're meant to do in the world. And she said, after one particular talk, a woman wrote her a letter and said, after hearing you speak, I thought I would be so motivated and inspired and fulfilled. She was like, but I actually left your talk feeling empty and like a failure, because you talk about, I should be doing, I should be living my purpose and whatever it is that I've been wanting to do since I was little, I should be doing. And she said, I don't have that. And you made me feel like there was something wrong because I didn't have that. And after the author got that feedback, she's like, she kind of reframed how she started talking about purpose and alignment. And essentially, your life is this basically quilt made up of these different squares that you're putting together to eventually form this one big perfect outcome, right? And when you're in the midst of it, it may look like you're all over the place and you can't find your footing. Some people know they want to be a teacher, a doctor, or officer, from when they're young or whatever, and that's what they pursue, and there's never been anything else. And then there's the rest of us who are, just really trying to figure it out, right? Season by season, year after year. But it's all connected, right? And if you reverse engineer your journey and take some time to think back over what it has looked like, you'll notice a common thread. And for me, the common thread was always speaking and communication, right? Even though the role may look different, right? The route, the destination never changed, just the vehicle. And so many of us switch vehicles often, right? And that's okay to have multiple vehicles, but usually your destination is the same. And so that's what my life has looked like. And so just with me being a teacher and constantly creating this personal development content for my students, it has forced me to look back on my journey and come out with these lessons. So I actually consider it a privilege, Nicole, because I had to figure it out in order to teach my students, right? Most of us, it's not a requirement for what we do. So I had to figure it out so that I can help others.
Well, I love that. Like, what a gift to all of us, right? That you can share that. And I love too, like what you were saying, and I haven't heard it this way before, and I really relate to that. Like, you have a particular skill set that's being used in different locations. And then you at some point look at it. One of my teachers says you can only connect the dots looking backwards, not going forward. And sometimes when we're in the forward thing, we get really stuck because we're like, I can't figure it out. I don't know where I'm going, all of those things. But if you look back, right, you can connect all those dots, and then those dots can actually help you with that forward. Cause like, I feel like for you too, like whatever you end up doing, whether it's staying with this or again, you know, another shift, speaking, communication, teaching is always going to be that anchor, which I love. Like, you've really got that down. And I love that, because I think for people who are watching and listening, can start to see that, like, okay, I don't want my corporate job, but there are skill sets and components of who I am and my skill sets that I can actually apply into different industries or different, right, whatever else I decide to do next.
That's it. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. You just pulled that whole thread of your life journey around the world together so well. That's awesome. Well, what would you suggest, you know, because you do teach this, it sounds like you do teach this. And so what do you suggest for people who are feeling a little like at sea or unfulfilled, or like a Liz Gilbert person, you know, who's like, I don't know, like I come out of this feeling like everybody else has figured it out and I haven't. Like, what suggestions would you give to someone in that space is like, I really don't know. Like, I just know I'm not doing it. Like, I feel like that's what a lot of people come to me. Like, I just know I'm not doing it. So what would you give advice for them?
Yeah. So first, on a like practical level, strategically, is identify what your gifts and your talents are. Now, there is a difference between the two. Your gift is what comes to you naturally. That's a little easier for you than maybe for someone else. Your talents is what you invested into making easier for you. So for example, you know, my gift is speaking. I've never been trained. I never took Toastmasters. I know how to get on the stage. I know how to command the audience. I know how to look at cues from my audience. I know how to pivot. I know all of those things, right? But my talent, for example, is plant-based nutrition. That's literally what I've invested time, energy, and money into accomplishing a level of mastery. So your talents are things that you've pursued in order to master. Your gifts is what occurs naturally, right? And so identifying those two things first and foremost, right? Because it's going to be the intersection of those two that probably most likely will help to align you at that purpose, right? But then presence, right? So starting to do more listening than you are speaking. And that's all about living in the present moment. You know, there's really no such thing as a past or future. There's only the present moment. And a lot of times when we're kind of beating ourselves up like that and saying things like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel like I'm all over the place. I'm watching other people feel like they found their purpose and I just feel displaced. That's usually because you're living your life in one of two places, either reviewing the past or rehearsing the future, and you're not present. And so remembering that just being in this moment right now, and a lot of that starts with stillness. A lot of that starts with quietness, right? I don't even know if quietness is a word. And a lot of that really starts with going inward and just learning how to be still. Usually, like, I guess I like to say praying is when you talk to God, and meditation is when God is talking to you, right? And so how can you just be still in the moment? And maybe, that moment is just 3 minutes a day, whatever it is, but just stop allowing your mind to create these narratives that you then run with. Right. When my students have these mental blocks and things and narratives that they create in their head and go crazy with them, my first piece of advice is always go get a second opinion. Right. If we go to the doctor and we get diagnosed with something, we're willing to get a second opinion on some physical stuff, but let's get a second opinion on the thoughts you're thinking. Okay, are you truly a failure? Have you really lost it all? Do you really not have a gift or a talent? Because that's a narrative you've made up. Okay, now let's go get a second opinion. So let's go sit down with somebody to help you dissect that. So once you master, and it's nothing is about mastery at once before you move on, but let's say while you're practicing stillness and listening, also take some time out and bring somebody into your ecosystem if they're not there already, whether it be a coach, a therapist, a counselor, whatever, who you can run these ideas by that you've made up. Literally, they're made up stories, and get a second opinion on, right? Get a different perspective. Some of us need life coaching. Some of us need mindset coaching. Some of us just need to change our diet because we don't have a clear mind because we're clogged up with sugar and dairy, you know what I mean? So what do you need to do to start thinking clearly and refiguring some of these things that you made up? So identify those gifts and talents, learn how to be in the present moment, and then get a second opinion on the stories you're making up.
That's awesome. I've never heard a phrase that way, get a second opinion on your thoughts, but it's awesome. It's true, right? It's like you talk to yourself all day long, and then there's like that awareness practice of it. And then being like, what am I telling myself all day? And is it true? So you like go ask somebody else if it's actually true. And they're probably gonna be like, that's crazy, because no, not at all, right? Yeah. And then how do you start to reinforce for yourself? That's awesome. And I loved, the way you're phrasing things. It's so beautiful, like how prayer is you talking to God, and then meditation is God talking to you, like getting that quiet space for yourself. And I have to say this because I'm looping all these different things, but you've said so many good things, Lisa, about when you're talking about obedience. And just really that practice of obedience too. And this is something that I don't always get into in these kinds of conversations, but I really just feel it's here, is that, obedience in my world, we talk about it as obey thy essence. And that we are sent here to do things. There are things for us to do. And then if you're not listening, you're not going to know, right? But if you're listening to the thing that, like all that jabbery stuff and made up stuff in your head, like you're not gonna be able to listen to the real thing that you're here to do. And when I say real thing you're here to do, we all have multiple things we're here to do. Like I love the trajectory of your career, but there's always something that we're here to do right now, right? And so I just felt like you were reflecting that. And I love it even in your career trajectory, that there's always something here we're here to do, and then it's gonna keep changing. And that purpose isn't like some static kind of an experience.
Yes.
Right. But if you're present, you'll get the one you're supposed to do right now.
That's exactly it, Nicole. So being present, but then after presence, you have to master obedience, because what happens typically, it's not that people don't know what to do next, or they're not sure, or they don't, whatever. It's that they're being disobedient. Something in you told you long time ago that you had outgrew this position, that you had outgrew this role, that you had outgrew this relationship, and you ignored the signs, or you operate and live in a state of fear and not faith. And so what that often causes individuals to do is stay in a season longer than they were meant to, right? So it's not that I was never meant to be a social worker, but I was obedient when the time came and left, right? And many people, you look back and they've been there 20, 30 years, they're miserable, but at this point, they're like, I might as well retire, I might as well live it out. Or they've been married in a long time, or they've been in this friendship for a long time, or they've been volunteering in a role. It could be a field where you're helping, but it still no longer serves you. And so the disobedience is the issue, because like you said, we all have gifts and we're all sent here to do something. We all have assignments, right? And when you're not obedient, and when you're not, and I'm not saying everybody quit their job today. What I tell my students is you have to create an exit strategy. It's not that you need to leave tomorrow. It's that you have no plan to leave. You don't have an exit date. So you create an exit strategy out of this role, out of this relationship, out of whatever is no longer serving you. And you follow the strategy, you follow the plan, you stick to the plan. Right. And so it's your disobedience that have kept you where you are. And most of our reasoning for being so unhappy is our own personal disobedience. Right. And so learning how to, when God tells you it's time to make a move, you should be doing this, you should be getting your health together, you should be doing this. There was a reason that financial advisor came into your life and told you about saving money. And now you have an emergency and you didn't be obedient then. And now you can't afford this emergency. Like these small lapses in obedience is usually what causes so much friction in our life.
That's exactly right. That was like my stuff. Like it's just true. It's so true. And a lot of this, in the series, we're talking a lot actually about worth too. And a lot of times it is, and that's another conversation too on top of that, but we don't value what we're hearing. We don't value ourselves enough to follow that call, because it really is that. And it is also being obedient. And I tell my people that all the time too. And I love that you're sharing it because I think it's important. I think a lot of us forget that there is something to be listening for and that next stage. And that really, to me, when I talk to anybody with purpose, there is something that they're listening to, and that's not that busy crap in your head, but something beyond, right? That's like saying, hey, this is the direction to go. So yeah, anyway, so powerful, Lisa. I love everything you shared. It's just so in tune with how I see the world too. And I love it. And I knew, really obedience is bringing us together too. And so that's power. Like that's just the power of it as well. Yeah. And I'm really grateful for your story. I love your story. Your story is so amazing. Just I think that we can get into these boxes on the direction of how life is going to go. And it's really powerful for women to hear stories that are outside the typical narratives and to know that it's cool. It's really cool to do that, do those things. Go live in Italy, then go live in China, be a personal trainer and be a plant-based food author and teacher. Like do all your things, right?
All of it. Absolutely.
Do all your things. Yeah.
And then do nothing. Never.
Yeah. Or do nothing. Well, I know you have something for our audience. Can you share a little bit about what you have for them, a little freebie for them?
Yeah. So it's a digital copy of my recipe book, The Plant-Based Foodie, 50 comfort food recipes. And the recipe book, we don't use any processed vegan food. We don't use any refined sugars. So really, helping individuals to first and foremost get physically and mentally clear. Many of us are vibrating on a really low frequency as a result of our diet. And so if you want to start, getting clear, vibrating on a higher frequency so that you can, navigate some of these challenges in life, then I always recommend starting with diet and of course a whole food plant-based diet. And so my freebie is digital access to my recipe book, The Plant-Based Foodie.
Incredible. I know that so many people are going to benefit from that. I'm just so honored that you gave your time and your wisdom and shared so much of yourself today. I'm really grateful for you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicole. This was actually quite fun. So thank you for being open.
I'm so glad.